Hi, my name is Sarah and I'm an event planner for the Orange County Library System. I plan a lot of author events and writing workshops, and since we're not able to have those at the library right now, I invited some of my writing friends to provide writing tips for you. This one is from the author of Planetside, Michael Mammay.
Hi, I'm Michael Mammay. I'm the author of Planetside, and I'm here today to talk about story structure. It's a long topic, and I only have 4 or 5 minutes, so I'm going to go pretty quick. So I apologize for that ahead of time. The first question you got to ask yourself is why structure? I've heard some writers say, "Hey, I don't like story structure because it hems me in, and it takes away my creativity or my flexibility." And for me, it's the opposite. Story structure is the canvas on which you paint. Right, an artist isn't going to say they can't paint a painting because they're limited to the canvas. That's the thing that frames the story, and it allows you to do whatever you want within that framework. For me, that's really freeing. The structure that I like to use is when I write in quarters. So I divide the story into 4 quarters, and I write each quarter of this story, and that fits within the 3-act structure. The first act is the first quarter of the book. The second act is the middle 2 quarters, and then the third act is the fourth quarter. So in Act 1, the first quarter of the story, there's really 2 things that you got to do. You have to have the inciting incident. And the inciting incident is that moment where the character begins a quest or a journey that he can't turn back from. And the question that I like to use to find the inciting incident or figure out what the inciting incident is, it all started when? It all started when? And if you answer that question, that's your inciting incident. Some people will say that you should go at the 10% mark of the book. Some people will say it needs to be in the first 2 or 3 pages. For me, it goes where it goes. Wherever it fits, that's where it fits. The next thing in the first act is the first act climax. The first act climax doesn't really have to be that big. It can be, but it's something that happens right about at the quarter mark of the book where something happens and it seals the deal. If the inciting incident didn't make things irreversible, now at the end of the first act, in the first act climax, you're on your way, okay? It's a done deal. Act 2 is probably the hardest to do. It's the biggest, and if you've ever heard anyone tell you have a saggy middle in your book, it's probably because of story structure, or it might be because of story structure. I mean, there's a lot of reasons. Probably the most important part of the second act is the midpoint twist. Okay, some people call it the midpoint twist. It's probably not even a twist. That's probably a misnomer. Just a midpoint, right? The middle of the book, the thing that divides it. And the reason that's important is because that's where the story changes. It goes from what we thought the story was to what the story really is. Okay, and it's also a point where the main character goes from being a little bit reactive to now taking charge of the action and moving the story forward. The midpoint question that I like to ask to figure out the midpoint is, it all changed when, right? Everything changed when this happened. And that's the midpoint of this story. In Act 2, you also need some other things. People will talk about plot points and things. I think you need about one major thing to split up each of those quarters and keep your pace going within the second act. But by far the most important thing is the midpoint. Then you get to the Act 2 climax. The Act 2 climax is a major event. It can be big. It can be a setback. It can be a betrayal. It can be a false victory. We thought we won, but oh no, there's another bad guy, or something like that. But it's important that the main character learns something in that, and that thing that they learn sets them up to go into the third act. The third act is pretty straightforward. You really only have the climax, which is the climax of the book. The thing with the third act climax is whatever you did in the second act, you got to one-up it in the third act, right? You can't be less. So whatever your second act climax was, your third act climax has to go one beyond. After you hit the third act climax, you're really into descending action. For me, the less descending action, the better, but that's a personal style preference. You can read reviews of my books that say I end too fast after it's all over, sometimes within 5 pages. That's just me. You can take as long as you want. You can draw things down. But once you hit the climax of the story's over. So, take a victory lap and go home. I'm Michael Mammay, and that's story structure in less than 5 minutes.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe to our YouTube channel to be the first to find out when we have new fun and informative videos for you. Orange County Library System is your place to learn, grow, connect.